Good morning, everybody. Hello. Welcome to my webinar on the 24th of September 2013. My name's Amanda Chadwick, and I'm a senior speaker at Peninsula Business Services Limited. Today, we're talking about part-time employees. So, okay, just a little bit of a summary here. 1 in 4 people at work are part-time. That's more than 6 million part-time workers in the UK, and the number has grown significantly in the last 20 years. Many more women are staying in work after having a baby, and many are returning part-time to make it easier to combine work with childcare. The evidence is that many more would like to make that choice. Some men are also working part-time, but usually for different reasons. Some are combining part-time work with studies, or have reduced their hours before retiring. Others would rather work full-time but are having to make do with 1 or more part-time jobs. And of course, women without children can also work part-time for these reasons. What we're seeing at Peninsula, I have to say, is lots of different types of work and work ways. We've got part-time workers, which is someone who works fewer hours than a full-time worker. There's no specific number of hours that a full-time there's no specific number of hours that makes someone full or part-time, but a full-time worker will usually work 35 hours or more a week. We've got job sharing. Job sharing arrangements are a special type of part-time work where a full-time job is divided between 2 part-time workers. This can be brilliant because there's always backup and they always cover each other, looking after each other's job. The job gets divided in a number of ways to best suit everyone's circumstances. For example, you could opt to work mornings and a colleague work in the afternoons, or alternatively, you could split the week between you, both working 3 set days with a handover period of 1 day of the week. A job share does offer the benefits to you and your employer if you're an employee of predictable hours, and it gives people the chance to arrange childcare, for example, and they know they'll always be covered for the job. So employers are switching to all different various types of work. We've also got term time working as well. I don't know if you've heard of that, but term time working is a type of part-time working where you can reduce your hours or take time off during school holidays. It allows parents to deal with childcare in a structured way and gives employers time to plan cover in absence. And it allows, for people sort of, that surge when everybody wants to book the holidays in the school months as well. So this is just like some of the ideas that we've got. We've got compressed working hours as well. We've got staggered shifts. There's all types of different ways of working that people can have. It's not just part-time. It all falls into the same pot. I think what the answer is there really is that lots of employers are looking for different solutions for their staff, and we're not just going for the normal 9 to 5 anymore. There's home working as well. There's night workers, people that just come in and work nights within a company to get things done. And I have to say to you, I get more work done working on my own and getting on with things than I do in an office environment. And my sister-in-law works from home as well, and she says the same, that she gets more work done at home than she does at work. So lots of employers now are looking at different opportunities and options that they have with their workers. It's not frowned upon in the past like it was a part-time worker. So regulations provide definitions of what a full-time and a part-time worker is. So a full-time worker, here's the legal script here, is defined as a person who is paid wholly or in part by reference to the time worked, and having regard to the custom and practice of the employer in relation to workers employed by the worker's employer under the same type of contract, is identifiable as a full-time worker. A part-time worker is defined as someone who is paid wholly or in part by reference to the time worked, and having regard to the custom and practice of the employer in relation to workers employed by the worker's employer under the same type of contract, is not identifiable as a full-time worker. So basically, a part-time worker is someone who works fewer hours than a full-time worker. There is no specific number of hours that makes someone full or part-time, but a full-time worker will usually work 35 hours or more a week. But what you've got to remember as HR, as managers, as employers, that part-time workers are protected from being treated less favourably than equivalent full-time workers just because they're part-time. So this is what part-time workers get protected for. Okay, I could quite make it quite simple and say to you, you know what, at the end of the day, part-time workers have exactly the same rights as a full-time worker. But when we've said that, you know, and people have misinterpreted that, what they've done is they've then given all their part-time workers exactly the same holidays as a full-time worker. So 28 days holiday for somebody who works part-time, goodness sake, that's far too much. And then we, you know, we meet companies that ask us to correct their mistakes when they're giving all their part-time workers full holidays. They need to be prorated, and we're going to talk about that later on. So let's have a look what part-time workers and why they should get the same treatment. So pay rates. So they get the same sick pay, the same maternity pay, paternity leave and adoptive leave and pay, exactly the same, okay, pay rates. We've got pension opportunities and benefits. If you're given a car, private health cover, you're giving perks and benefits to a full-time worker, do not, please do not exclude your part-time worker. They're entitled to the same benefits. They may be prorated because of their hours. The same pension opportunities. So if you've got an amazing pension package for your full-time worker, then you should have an amazing pension package if they qualify for a part-time worker. And don't forget that the pension provider needs to go on the statement of main terms. Holidays we'll talk about, they need to be prorated. You can't exclude me for training and career development because I'm a part-time worker. Well, that would be a bit wrong, wouldn't it? You have to offer me the job, but you have to say to me, you know, would I be willing to take it as a full-time job? And you have to offer me the vacancy. Okay, so selection for promotion and transfer or for redundancy. No unfair selection for redundancy here, and we'll talk about that later on. Opportunities for career breaks. Say some benefits are applied pro rata in proportion to hours worked. And I'm going to give you an example here. If a full-time worker gets a £1,000 bonus and a part-time worker works half the number of hours, they should get £500. You can't not give it them because they work for, you know, just because they're a part-time worker, and you think, well, I'm not going to give it them because they're a part-time worker, they're not entitled to it, they haven't put as many hours as in my full-time workers, because that is unfair. So then we've got overtime pay. Part-time workers may not get overtime pay until they've worked over their normal hours of a full-time worker. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that's in writing, don't we? We need to make sure that that's in our employee handbook so that people know what we mean by that. So types of part-time working, job share, I've told you about that, where a full-time job is divided into two part-time jobs, term time work, evening or weekend work, casual work, bank work. We've got lots of different areas of part-time working to consider. Okay, we've got benefits for the employee. It may be that they've got family commitments, they've got carer responsibilities, and I can see pressure on the employer in the future for more people to work part-time because they will have more carer responsibilities. We've got learning, we've got other work. So people might have additional learning. They might be a student and want part-time working because they need the money to put them through their exams. We've got other work. They might have a few jobs going at the same time, and because that's all that's available on the market at the moment, so they might have 3 part-time jobs. So it leads me to other work as well. So you need to know about any other work they've got because of the working time directive. So that needs to go in your handbook to say if you want to work elsewhere, please apply in writing. The work-life balance, some people prefer to do part-time working because it works well with their family and their commitments. Job share. People want to share a job. Retired people might want part-time working, fits in with the lifestyle, and obviously children as well. Excuse me. So part-time employees enjoy the same statutory rights as a full-time worker. We mentioned a few of them before, didn't we? So we've got rates of pay. Part-time workers must get at least the same hourly rate as a full-time worker doing a similar job. If somebody is a part-time worker, your employers can set the same hours threshold for enhanced overtime pay as for full-timers. So you might not get overtime pay until you've worked more than normal hours of a full-time worker. So that's the first thing. So remember that about pay. But also pension opportunities. Just to remind you, you shouldn't discriminate between full-time and part-time workers over access to pension schemes. Other benefits which we spoke about earlier on, company cars, employee discounts, health insurance, it might be given pro rata. Excuse me, I'm coughing. We spoke about training, career development. Part-time workers mustn't be excluded from training and career development opportunities. Wherever possible, training must be organised at times that suits most workers, and this includes part-time workers as well, so speak to them about it. But you might want to write something in the contract that says something about attending training courses as well. We'll talk about holidays in a moment, and, you know, we've got to remember that, you know, lots of employers are inflexible now. Lots of employers have opportunities for career breaks. Some employers let employees take career breaks, and part-time workers have the right to the same opportunities. Same with sick pay, maternity, adoptive, paternity leave and pay. Part-timers entitled to sick pay, maternity pay, paternity and adoptive leave and pay, plus parental leave, as full-time staff are. And if companies give more than the statutory entitlement, then part-timers must also get these contractual benefits as well. And also when we talk about selection from promotion or transfer or redundancy, being part-time can't be used as a reason for selection for transfer, redundancy or refusing a promotion unless it can be justified objectively. So, part-time employees, let me remind you, enjoy the same statutory rights as a full-time worker. Regulations provide that employers also give equivalent contractual benefits. Your part-time workers are entitled to a contract of employment, same as a full-time worker. Should also be given, excuse me, as a full-time worker, itemised pay statements. They're entitled to the national minimum wage, lunch breaks, etc. in the same way as your full-time staff are too. All employees become entitled to receive a written contract of employment after they've been with you for 1 month, but they must actually receive it within 2 months of starting work. Remember when I've spoke on my previous webinars that the penalty really is a full month's pay on average if you don't issue a statement of main terms. That's the first penalty that you'll get if you end up in tribunal. I haven't issued a statement of main terms within the 8-week period, and that is usually on average about £1,400 really, plus any additional penalties that you have to pay out, like unfair dismissal, breach contract, illegal deductions, which could be added on as well. But just to wrap it up, statement of main terms, not issuing it within 8 weeks, you know, if there's a penalty, £1,400. You should aim to give all new starters anyway a written contract at the start of employment during any induction period. Makes sense, doesn't it? I wouldn't start a job with you unless you gave me a written statement of main terms anyway. And I'd like to see a handbook right at the very beginning, whether I'm part-time or full-time. I don't care. I want an induction with every company that I speak to. I want an induction form that says it's a legal document. And at that point, I want to make sure that people are getting the health and safety policy, health and safety procedures, they're getting the training, and they're getting the employment law handbook as well, which contains your rules. So rules in there, you know, as I keep saying at every webinar, 10% is the law, 90% is the policies and procedures that you put in place, you know, that, you know, your rules for working with your company. You should always aim to treat all your staff in the same way, otherwise you risk grievances being raised or even discrimination claims. So just remember that. The last thing we want is a tribunal. Okay, so remember, contractual benefits can be prorated for part-time workers. Entitlements can be reduced pro rata to the amount of time per week that the part-time staff work for you. For example, if you give a contractual attendance bonus and you have someone who works 2.5 days a week, they will only receive half the bonus that a 5-day week worker receives. So it's quite simple to work out. Part-time staff are entitled to holidays that should be calculated on a pro rata basis. The current statutory minimal holiday entitlement is 28 days for a 5-day week worker. So someone working 2.5 days a week would only receive 14 days for a whole year. So let's talk about the holiday side of it. Most full-time workers, the 5-day week, receive 28 days paid annual leave per year. Remember, everybody, as per my webinar the other day, somebody on sick leave has the right to carry over paid annual leave, so remember that, but it's only actually the maximum top of 4 weeks, not the 1.6 days. This is calculated by multiplying a normal week, 5 days, by the annual entitlement of 5.6 weeks. So let's work out what holidays a part-time worker would be entitled to. So the calculation for working out holidays is, for example, a worker works 3 days a week. Their leave is calculated by multiplying 3 by 5.6, which comes to 16.8 days of annual paid leave. That's how you work it. I work 2 days, times it by 5.6. I work 1 day, times it by 5.6. That's the equation you should be using. But Peninsula clients, anybody listening to me now, don't forget, if you're an HR Online client, we have, that's the iCloud service that we offer you. Use that. If you're a Peninsula client, that's what our advice line is for, to calculate that for you. Don't sit there struggling. We can work that out for you. Some firms prefer to calculate holidays by the hour for part-time workers, and other members of staff on regular pattern hours. So there's a special calculation there, which I'm not going to go into, but it involves the sum of 12.07. Look, it can be quite complicated. So what I'd say to anybody out there is, usually when you're working out hourly pay for night workers, for regular hour people, you know, you do need to have legal advice on that and help. All workers can have bank holidays included in normal working hours. So I don't know if you know that, but there's not many people that are actually entitled legally to bank holidays, and it's not bank workers, by the way. So what I'd say to you is, when you write a part-time contract for the first time, you may want to consider putting the bank holidays as part of their annual leave entitlement, rather than giving it over and above. So you might want to write that into the contract. You can do that. So, if you are treating part-time workers differently, an employer will need to objectively justify the reason why they treat part-time staff differently, and show the reason can meet a genuine business need. An example of objective justification, I'm sure you've heard this, in employment law, would include a part-time worker who was denied health insurance, even though a comparable full-time worker has one. Because of the disproportionate cost of the organisation of providing the benefit. The employer actually could still offer the benefit, but would offer the chance for the part-time employer to make up with the contribution, so that they have this benefit accessible to them. If a part-time worker thinks they are being treated less favourably, they should first discuss the issue with their line manager. They can ask for a written statement from the employer explaining the reason for the less favourable treatment. Why am I not getting, you know, health cover? And then the employer would write back. This request should be in writing, and the response from the employer should be given within 21 days. If the worker is not satisfied with the reason, they may be able to make a claim to the employment tribunal. But what I would say here is, the last thing an employer wants to do, I want a happy workforce, so I'm going to speak to my staff. What I'm definitely going to have is, I'm going to have grievance procedures in place in the handbook, and I'm going to talk about and to make sure that they are aware of how they make a complaint if they're unhappy, and that there's an appeal procedure in place. This is the last resort, an employment tribunal. So, part-time worker issues. So, bringing up unjust treatment. To be able to claim unfair treatment, the employer will have to show that their treatment has been less favourable than that of a full-time worker. They cannot compare themselves with just any worker. It will have to be a full-time worker working for the same employer in their own workplace, working under the same type of contract as them, and doing the same job or similar job. If there is no full-time worker at their own workplace who matches the description, they could choose someone from another of their own employer's locations, not, you know, somewhere next door. Make sure you do have grievance procedures in place and appeal procedures in place, just so you can sort out any issues earlier on. Issues can arise when an employee returns to work after absence, for example maternity leave, and requests the right to work part-time. It's always best to speak to your staff. I always find that, especially in mediation. A lot of these huge problems that grow should have been sorted out right at the very beginning from speaking to staff. So, the right to request part-time hours. First of all, just to remind you that I don't automatically have the right to part-time workers. I do have the right to request it, though. So what we're going to say is, we'll have referenced this in the handbook, and we're going to say, if you want to request part-time hours, you must apply in writing first, and then the employer responds in writing. Okay? What we usually find, that an employee who's been working full-time and they choose to shift to part-time work is usually somebody who comes back off maternity leave. That's the usual case. Or somebody who's been suffering from ill health, maybe. If an employer has been working full-time and chooses to shift to part-time working, they can compare their treatment with what they previously enjoyed when they were full-time. An example would be a return from maternity leave, and it is agreed that they return to the same job but part-time. They should be able to keep their existing terms and conditions pro rata to their working hours unless they can justify the difference. They have the right to compare their situation to the one they went on before they went on maternity. unless they were, that's only if they were not off for more than 12 months. So, the right to ask for flexible working hours. This is something I covered earlier on. I want to work flexible hours. And I have to say that employers are now looking, then there's not just part-time or full-time working now. Employers are exhausting any option just to get, and keep good members of staff. Compressed hours, termed working hours. Because if you, adapt your workforce to work needs, you get buy-in, you get reliability, and you get a dedicated individual. I remember one of the companies I worked with years and years ago adapted flexible hours, compressed working and part-time working on a dedicated part-time team, and they had it mainly consisted I have to say 90%, 80% was women, maybe 20% were men. And the men that worked there actually were students that were at university. They covered the 6 to 12 o'clock in the evening shift, and they literally did nearly work full-time with the hours that they did, some of them. But there were a lot of parents on there. There were a lot of working mums. There were a lot of carers on there. And this was way before anybody considered all these options that are available. And you know what? That work team, what I can say to you about that work team is there was hardly any sickness. There wasn't any lateness, I don't think. There was dedication, and a lot of the staff had been there for 10, 12 years because the company accommodated their needs. And that's what you get when you do accommodate an employee's needs. And it doesn't have to be a sad story part. People think part-time, oh my gosh, flexible working. It can be easy, and it can be easy to adjust your workforce as well. The right to ask for flexible working, well, if you are the parent of a child under 17, under 18 if your child is disabled or caring for an adult, must also have worked for your employer for at least 26 weeks. Flexible working can include part-time, working school hours, working flexi-time, home working, job sharing, shift working, staggering hours and compressing hours. And that's what we're looking at with flexible hours. The right to flexible working. Employers have the right to request flexible working hours. Employers do not have to agree, remember that. So they request it in writing, and the employer has to give that request serious consideration and a reply in writing as well. If, to refuse it, they have to have a really good business reason if they decide not to agree. If they are asking for flexible working hours because they're a parent, they must be responsible for the child on a day-to-day basis. If they are caring for an adult, the person must be a husband, a wife, a civil partner, a close family relative, could also be someone who isn't related but might live at the same address. Can make one request to work flexibly each year, and as I said, it must be in writing anyway. But there's lots of avenues to exhaust here. I'd rather have a dedicated individual on a job share basis, and then I know that what you'll find is if you're flexible with your member of staff, and we can take doctors' surgeries from years ago for this. Doctors' surgeries years ago literally just had women working there, working mums that did job share, part-time hours, and they hardly had any sickness, any lateness. They had dedication, and people didn't exploit them or take the mickey because the doctors looked after them, they looked after the doctors. So learn from this. Learn the different ways you can actually have employees within your workplace. It might just work for you. You might attract really skilled workers by using students that work nights or stagger their hours or compressed hours. So have a look at this. Compressed hours, by the way, I've been talking about compressed hours, is where you put all the hours in a shorter period. So remember, this is things to remember. Keep a check that pay rates for part-timers are in line with your full-time workers and equivalent full-time roles. Part-time workers receive pro-rata holidays, not full entitlement. Common harmful mistakes are in redundancy situations where that you sort of reduce the number of roles without considering the retention of part-time workers, as you only have full-time roles available. That's a really big mistake that you make in redundancy situations. Companies cannot select for redundancies on the basis of part-time status. Companies have an obligation to discuss with the part-time worker if they would be willing to work full-time, or see if any employees may choose to work on a part-time basis. Always remember, though, if you're changing somebody's statement of main terms from full-time to part-time or part-time to full-time, or making any change whatsoever, you need to change the statement of main terms. Don't just make the change verbally. Correct the statement of main terms when hours are reduced, or changes agreed. What we do is when we go in to help companies, quite often we'll find old SMTs still in place which have great benefits on and full-time hours and holidays when the person's been working part-time for many years. So make sure you do change the statement of main terms. I hope I've helped you today on part-time workers. I think I could have just had one slide up really at the very beginning and said to you, listen everybody, part-time workers have exactly the same rights as a full-time worker. But remember, holidays are prorated and then the benefits can be. Objectively justify any discrimination. But for me, you see, I'm open to good ideas for businesses, and we work within and to integrate ourselves within 26,000 companies throughout the UK. I have to say to you, we come up with lots of ideas for companies where they might not have thought of a solution before. So I hope you found this interesting and worthwhile listening to today. It's been quite a short webinar today, only half an hour. Normally our other ones can be lasting 45 minutes to an hour, and you can catch any previous webinars that I've held on my YouTube link, which is www.youtube.com/PBS Press Office. As I spoke to you, I mentioned pensions before, and I said that you must be changing your statement of main terms to incorporate the pension provider. I have to say that most of our clients, the majority of our clients, this won't be applicable until 2014 and 2015, but you should start thinking about your providers now. You will have to make changes to your statement of main terms, but also your employment law handbook as well, and you will have to check your workforce status. So if anybody's interested in attending one of my events that I'm hosting throughout the country regarding pensions, I'm working alongside a pension expert who makes things very simple, and also our tribunal expert and myself. If you'd like to attend one of our free events on pensions or any of our other free events that we host throughout the UK, you can contact me at, excuse me for coughing all the time through this webinar, free@peninsula-uk.com. If you are a Peninsula client, remember you are using our services to help you. I don't want you sat there struggling with what workforce status is, changing statement of main terms, or adapting your own employment law handbooks, because that's what you're paying us for and that's what you're indemnified for. You must use the advice line as often as possible. And if there's anything I've spoken about today and you want to query anything I've said about part-time workers or question what you've got in place, use the advice line for that. You're indemnified. Also, you must be aware of a couple of new products that we've introduced, which is our Employee Assistance Programme and also our HR Online. There's nothing quite like it on the market. It's a cloud-based technology system that has all your policies, procedures, documentation uploaded confidentially, and in fact I can request a holiday on there on your iPhone, on my iPhone, to you, and you can respond immediately, and I do that through the iCloud service. It's absolutely brilliant. There's nothing quite like it on the market, and it's called HR Online. Now, for anybody who's listening that's not a Peninsula client and you'd like more information about what we do, you'd like to attend one of our free events, or anybody listening to me that would like some editorial written on a particular topic for any magazines or websites that you host, or you would like to have an event for free hosted for your clients, you can contact me, Amanda, at peninsula-uk.com. Or both of those email addresses come direct to me and the response will be from me. I hope I've helped you. I'd like to thank you very much for listening to me today, and I hope you join me again soon. Thank you very much.